Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been dealing with stage 3 colon cancer for about 4 months now. The diagnosis came out of nowhere. I was having some stomach issues, thought it was just stress from work, maybe my diet. I've been pulling a lot of late nights on a big project. When I finally went to the doctor, they found it pretty advanced. The oncologist laid out the treatment plan and I've been doing chemo ever since. The physical changes happened fast. My hair started falling out in clumps after the second round of chemo. I shaved it all off because seeing it on my pillow every morning was worse than just being bald. Then my eyebrows went. My skin got this weird grayish tone. I dropped 40 pounds in 3 months because eating became this horrible gamble, where half the time I'd throw up whatever I managed to get down. I wear beanies now because my head gets cold, and also because it's just easier than seeing people stare. My husband has been amazing through all of this. He keeps telling me I'm beautiful, brings me ginger tea when the nausea gets bad, holds my hand during the chemo sessions. We've been married for 6 years, and I never really knew what in sickness and in health meant until now. So today I needed groceries. My husband offered to go, but I wanted to feel normal for like an hour. Do a normal person thing. I drove to the Target in Minneapolis, the one near our place, and grabbed a cart. I had a list of bland foods that my oncologist said might be easier on my stomach. Crackers, bananas, maybe some chicken broth. Normal grocery trip stuff. I was in the produce section looking at cantaloupes when she approached me. This woman, probably in her 50s, perfectly styled hair, expensive looking jacket, pushing her cart right up next to mine. She looked me up and down with this concerned expression and asked if I was okay because I looked exhausted. I get this a lot now, so I've got my standard response ready. I told her I was fine and thanked her. I turned back to the cantaloupes. I was trying to remember if melon was on my safe foods list or if it would make me sick. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. She told me she didn't mean to pry, but had I thought about putting more effort into my appearance. She said she knew us ladies could get comfortable, but men really noticed these things. Then she told me about her daughter who let herself go after her second baby and how her husband almost left because of it. I just stood there. I was holding this cantaloupe and I couldn't process what she just said. This woman was standing in the middle of Target giving me unsolicited advice about my appearance like she had any right to do that. She kept going like she couldn't help herself. She told me a little makeup goes a long way and that there were some really nice wigs out there now if I was having hair troubles. She said I was still young enough to turn things around. Something inside me just broke. Or maybe it snapped into place. I turned to look at her directly and told her very flatly that I had cancer, stage 3. I explained that the chemo made me look like this and that I was trying to figure out if I could eat this melon without vomiting. I told her my husband thought I was beautiful and asked if there was anything else she wanted to say. Her face went completely white. All the color just drained out. Her mouth opened and closed and she started stammering. She said, oh my God, she was so sorry and she didn't know and she just thought something, but she couldn't finish the sentence. I cut her off and asked her what she thought. Did she think I needed her advice? I told her I was just trying to buy groceries. She backed away from me like I'd slapped her. She actually left her cart right there in the produce section and speed walked toward the exit. I watched her go, still holding the cantaloupe. My hands started shaking after she left. This other woman who'd been looking at lettuce nearby came over and told me good for me. She said some people needed to hear it. I put the cantaloupe in my cart. I didn't even know if I wanted it anymore, but I put it in there. I finished my shopping in kind of a daze. At checkout, the cashier was really nice to me, which almost made me cry because I was still riding this weird adrenaline wave. When I got home, my husband helped me bring in the groceries. I told him what happened while we were putting things away. He said she absolutely deserved that and asked what kind of person walked up to a stranger and said something like that. I told him I didn't know and that I felt kind of bad because she looked really upset. He said good, and that maybe she'd think twice before commenting on someone else's appearance. I called my mom later because I needed to talk it through with someone else. My mom is usually pretty understanding, but she surprised me. She asked if I didn't think that was a little harsh and said the woman was probably just trying to help. I asked her help with what because I wasn't asking for help. I was buying groceries. She said she knew that, but the woman didn't know about my situation. She was probably coming from a good place. I asked what kind of good place involved telling strangers they looked like garbage. My mom said that wasn't what she meant. We kinda left it there, but now I'm sitting here on my couch, still feeling shaky, still replaying it. Part of me wishes I'd just walked away. But another part of me, the part that's so tired of being sick and looking sick and having people either stare or pity me, that part feels satisfied. Like I finally said what I've been wanting to say to every person who's looked at me weird in the past 4 months. The woman at Target had no idea what she was walking into when she decided to give me her unsolicited advice. She saw someone who looked different from what she thought a woman should look like and decided that gave her the right to fix me. She didn't see someone fighting cancer. She didn't see someone who was just trying to get through a normal grocery trip without breaking down. She saw a project. I keep thinking about the look on her face when I told her about the cancer, the way all the color drained out and she couldn't form a complete sentence. Part of me feels guilty about that, but the bigger part of me thinks about all the times I've had to smile politely when people stared or made comments or asked inappropriate questions. All the times I've had to make other people comfortable with my illness. My husband came and sat with me on the couch after we finished putting away the groceries. He didn't say anything, just put his arm around me. He knows that sometimes I need to process things quietly. He told me again that the woman deserved what I said and that I had nothing to feel bad about. I thought about texting my mom back, but I didn't know what to say. She means well, but she doesn't get it. She hasn't had to live in this body that is fighting itself. She hasn't had strangers feel entitled to comment on her appearance in the middle of a grocery store. The other woman in the produce section, the one who told me good for me, she got it. She saw what happened and she understood. Maybe she'd been in a similar situation. Maybe she'd just seen enough entitled people to recognize one when she saw it. I don't know if I was too harsh or if the woman deserved it. Maybe both things can be true. But I do know this. Don't comment on how strangers look. You have no idea what they're going through. You don't know if they're sick or struggling or just having a bad day. You don't have the right to someone else's body or face or choices. And I'm done apologizing for looking like someone who's fighting for their life, because that's exactly what I am. I'm fighting every single day. Every meal I manage to keep down is a victory. Every chemo session I survive is a win. Every trip to Target where I feel normal for an hour is precious. My wife and I had been saving for years to buy our first house. We lived in a cramped apartment where we could barely fit our growing family. When our daughter was born 2 years ago, we knew we had to make it happen. We cut back on everything. No vacations, no eating out, packed lunches every day. My wife picked up extra shifts at her job, and I started doing weekend work whenever I could get it. It was exhausting, but we had a goal. After what felt like forever, we closed on our house 2 weeks ago. It's not huge, but it's ours. 3 bedrooms, a small yard that needs work, and enough space that our toddler can actually run around without bumping into furniture every 5 seconds. We were so excited. The day we got the keys, my wife cried. Happy tears. We stood in the empty living room and just held each other, talking about all our plans. But here's the thing about finally getting your own space after years of cramping yourselves into tiny apartments. You want to actually enjoy it. You want to unpack at your own pace, figure out where everything goes, maybe sit on your couch in your own living room without pants on if you feel like it. You know, normal homeowner stuff. We weren't even close to unpacked when my wife's parents called. Her mom said they were thinking about coming to visit next month, maybe stay for 3 nights over a weekend. They wanted to see the new house. My wife thought that sounded great and told them to let us get settled first. Her mom agreed and said they'd plan it out. We'd have a month to get our act together, make the place presentable, maybe even get some of the boxes out of the guest room. I was looking forward to showing them around once we had things set up properly. Then, exactly 1 week later, On a Sunday afternoon, I heard a car pull up in the driveway. I looked out the window and saw my in-law's car packed to the brim. Her parents and her two youngest siblings piled out, stretching like they'd been driving for hours. I asked my wife if she knew her family was coming today. She looked just confused. She went outside and I followed. My wife asked her mom and dad what they were doing here. Her dad said they decided why wait and that they packed up the car that morning and drove here. He told us not to worry because they were only staying 3 nights like they said. Her mom mentioned they brought house gifts and that they could help us unpack. I stood there with a smile plastered on my face while inside I was screaming. 3 nights! I could handle 3 nights. Our house was a disaster, but okay, fine. 3 nights. The first night was manageable. They did help us unpack a few boxes. They brought us a really nice set of kitchen knives and some other stuff we actually needed. I appreciated it, I really did. We ordered pizza, they kept our daughter entertained, and I told myself this was what family does. The second night they broke out the beer. They sat around our kitchen table until almost midnight, laughing and talking loud. My daughter, who usually goes to bed at 8, was running around at 10:30 because all the excitement had her wound up. I had to be at work at 7 the next morning. I finally just went to bed and left them to it. On the third morning, I was getting ready for work when her dad made an announcement. He said they were thinking about staying one more night because they were having such a good time. 4 nights? Okay. 1 more night? I gritted my teeth and said it was fine. Then yesterday, my wife told me her sister wanted to come up for the weekend, and apparently, a few other relatives were planning to stop by during the week. I lost it internally. Not at my wife, not at them, just at the situation. My whole routine was destroyed. I usually mow the lawn on Tuesday evenings. I had planned to fix the fence this week. I needed to organize the garage. Instead, I had people drinking beer at my kitchen table every night, keeping my kid up late, using my bathroom, eating my food. I started working late just to avoid coming home. I'd sit in my car in the parking lot at work, just sitting there in silence, dreading walking into my own house. The house I'd worked so hard for. The house that was supposed to be my refuge. Last night I came home at 9. They were all still up, of course. Beer cans everywhere. My daughter was cranky and overtired. The kitchen was a mess. I pulled my wife aside and told her we needed to talk. She asked what was wrong. I said I needed them to leave and that I was sorry, but I needed everyone gone. She said they were her family and that they came all this way. I told her they showed up unannounced, then extended their stay, and now more people wanted to come. I reminded her we just moved in and that I was exhausted. I told her I couldn't relax in my own home. She mentioned they brought us gifts and were trying to help. I said I appreciated that, I really did, but that I needed to tell her something. I explained this could never happen again. People couldn't just show up whenever they wanted. And I said no one stays during the week when I have work. I told her I needed boundaries. My wife got quiet. She looked hurt, and that killed me, but I stood my ground. I told her I was asking them to leave tomorrow. I also said that right now I wanted to be clear that I loved her family, but we needed rules. Our house, our rules. This morning my wife talked to her parents. Her mom got all offended and said they were just trying to be helpful and spend time with us. Her dad didn't say much, just started packing up the car with this look on his face like I'd personally insulted him. They left an hour ago. The house is quiet. My daughter is napping. I'm about to mow the lawn. My wife hasn't really talked to me since this morning. She's upset, I know she is. But looking around at my living room, finally empty except for my own family, I feel like I can breathe again. I'm sure I'll hear about this for years at family gatherings, but honestly, worth it. Growing up, my parents went all out with Halloween decorations, and our house was the one every kid in the neighborhood wanted to visit. When I bought my first house, I knew I wanted to carry on that tradition. I spent weeks planning my setup each year, not because I had to, but because I genuinely enjoyed seeing the kids' faces light up when they walked up to my front yard. This year, I'd outdone myself. I had a graveyard scene with tombstones, a fog machine, animatronic zombies, giant spiders with glowing eyes, and string lights everywhere. The whole display probably cost me close to $800, but it was worth it. My neighbors loved it, and kids were already talking about it days before Halloween. I'm a middle school teacher, so I understand kids. I get that they're excited, that they want candy, that Halloween is magical for them. That's why I always bought the good stuff. Full-size candy bars, bags of chips, juice boxes, little toys. I filled a massive bowl and sat on my porch to hand things out personally. Some people just leave the bowl out with a sign asking kids to take one. But I liked interacting with the kids, seeing their costumes, hearing them say thank you. The evening started perfectly. I had a steady stream of trick-or-treaters, all polite, all adorable in their costumes. Parents hung back on the sidewalk, waving and thanking me. It was exactly what I'd hoped for. Then around 7:30 I heard someone running up my walkway. A kid, maybe 9 or 10, dressed as some kind of ninja, bolted toward my porch. Before I could even say hello, he grabbed my bowl with both hands and started dumping the entire thing into his pillowcase. I stopped him and gently pulled the bowl back. I told him he could take a few pieces, but we needed to leave some for the other kids. The kid looked at me like I'd just insulted his entire family. He complained loudly that he wanted all of them. I explained that it wasn't how it worked and asked him to pick 3 or 4 things he really liked so the next kids could have some too. He whined that it wasn't fair, but I told him it was very fair because everyone gets a turn. That's when I heard the footsteps. Heavy, angry footsteps coming up behind him. A woman appeared, probably in her late 30s. She'd been walking around the neighborhood drinking wine while her kid trick-or-treated. She demanded to know what the problem was. I explained there was no problem, that I'd just asked her son to take a few pieces instead of the whole bowl so other kids could have some too. She told me her son could take however much he wanted because it was Halloween. I said I understood that, but I had a lot of kids coming by tonight and wanted to make sure everyone got something. She snapped back that I should have bought more candy then. I explained that I'd bought plenty of candy, but if every kid took the entire bowl, then nobody else would get any. The kid was still standing there holding his pillowcase open expectantly, looking between his mother and me. She called me ridiculous and said it was just candy. She demanded I give him what he wants. I told her I was going to ask her to leave if she couldn't respect my rules for my house. She went off about how I put decorations out and put candy out, so now I wanted to control how much people take. She said that wasn't how this works. I corrected her and said it was how it works, because this was my property. She stared at me for a long moment, her face getting redder. Then she grabbed her son's arm and said, "They didn't need my cheap candy anyway." She dragged him down the walkway, muttering loud enough for me to hear about how rude and selfish I was. I watched them go, then went back to handing out candy. I felt a little rattled, but I tried to shake it off. In 15 years of teaching, I dealt with worse. About 20 minutes later, I was chatting with a little girl dressed as a fairy when I heard someone scream from the street. They were yelling that my decorations were on fire. I spun around and saw flames shooting up from my graveyard display. Orange and yellow fire was consuming my tombstones, melting the plastic, spreading toward the animatronic zombies. I ran inside, grabbed my fire extinguisher, and sprayed it at the flames, but it wasn't enough. The fire was spreading too fast. Someone had already called 911. Within minutes, I heard sirens. Fire trucks pulled up, and firefighters jumped out dragging hoses across my yard. They got the fire under control quickly, but not before it destroyed most of my decorations. The fog machine was melted. The tombstones were charred black. The spiders were gone completely. The grass was scorched, and my front bushes were singed. A police officer approached me while the firefighters finished up. He asked if I knew how this started. I told him I had no idea, and that I was just handing out candy. He asked if anyone suspicious came by tonight. Then it hit me. The woman. Her anger. The way she'd stormed off. I told him that someone suspicious had come by. I explained the whole confrontation to him. He wrote everything down, then asked if I had security cameras. I did. I'd installed them last year after someone stole a package from my porch. I pulled up the footage on my phone and there it was, clear as day. The woman had come back. She'd waited until I was distracted with other trick-or-treaters, walked up to my decorations, pulled out a spray can and a lighter from her purse, and set everything on fire. She'd stood there for a second, watching it catch, then walked away. The officer's jaw tightened when he watched the footage. He asked if I could send that to him. I told him absolutely. He radioed for backup and gave them a description. Within an hour, they'd tracked her down. She lived only 4 blocks away, and neighbors had seen her walking around earlier with a wine glass. Officers went to her house and arrested her on the spot. I later found out she tried to deny everything until they showed her the video footage. Then she said it was an accident, that she'd just been lighting a cigarette with a spray can right next to my decorations. Sure, she was charged with arson, destruction of property, and reckless endangerment since the fire could have spread to my house. Insurance covered the damages. I never got an apology from her, but I did get some justice. I've been doing contract management for some years now. I was decent at it because I actually read the fine print, which made me weird compared to everyone else in the office. My boss seemed fine at first. A little full of himself, sure, but he knew his stuff. He'd been with the company for over 10 years, so he walked around like he owned the place. The problem was that somewhere along the way, all that experience turned into arrogance. He stopped double-checking things, stopped asking questions, started thinking he knew better than everyone else in the room. I didn't mind, honestly. I kept my head down, did my work, and went home. I wasn't trying to make waves or climb any ladders. I just wanted my paycheck and maybe enough left over for weekend takeout. Things started shifting about 6 months in. My boss got promoted to senior account manager, which meant he was now handling our biggest clients directly. That should have been fine. He had the experience, the credentials, the confidence. But confidence without caution is just recklessness wearing a suit. The client in question was massive. Multi-million-dollar contract. They manufactured industrial equipment, and we handled their logistics coordination across 4 states. The contract was thick as a phone book and just boring to read, but it was also ironclad. Every clause had a clause. Every contingency had a backup plan. And buried in Section 12, subsection C, was a very clear rule about delivery schedule modifications. Long story short, if we changed the delivery window without 72 hours written notice, they could trigger a penalty fee. Not a small one either. We're talking 6 figures. I only knew this because I'd actually read the contract when it came across my desk. I'd even made a little cheat sheet for myself, highlighting the sections that could bite us if we weren't careful. So when I saw the email draft sitting in the shared folder, my stomach dropped. My boss had written up a schedule adjustment. Standard stuff, nothing dramatic. A shipment was getting pushed back by 2 days because of a supplier delay on our end. Reasonable, fixable. But the email was dated to go out that afternoon, and the delivery change was set for the next morning. That was less than 24 hours, nowhere near 72. I printed the email draft and the relevant contract section, then walked to his office. He was on a call, but he waved me in. I waited until he hung up. I said sorry for interrupting and told him I'd been reviewing the schedule adjustment email for the industrial client. I explained that I thought we might have a timing problem with it. He didn't even look at the paper I was holding. He asked me what kind of problem I was talking about. I explained that the contract needed 72 hours notice for any delivery changes, and that this one was going out today for a change tomorrow. I pointed out that it wasn't enough time and that if they caught it, we'd be looking at a penalty. He looked at his screen, then back at me. He said he'd handled this account for 5 years and that he knew what he was doing. I started to say I was sure he did, but he cut me off. He told me not to interfere and that he had it covered. He turned back to his monitor. Not mean about it, just final, like I was a kid asking why the sky was blue. I stood there for a second, holding the paper. Then I set it on the edge of his desk and walked out. I didn't bring it up again. I didn't forward the contract clause to anyone else. I didn't loop in HR or his boss or anyone with a fancier title. He'd said not to interfere, so I didn't. I went back to my cubicle, filed my notes, and watched the email get sent out at 3 that afternoon. Exactly how he'd written it. I'm not going to lie, part of me hoped I was wrong. Maybe he knew something I didn't. Maybe there was a side agreement or a verbal understanding that wasn't in the paperwork. Maybe I'd misread the clause, but I hadn't. 2 weeks later, the letter arrived. Not an email, an actual letter, on legal letterhead, delivered via courier. I happened to be in the office when it came in. The receptionist looked confused when she signed for it, and I felt my stomach twist. The client's legal team had caught the timing violation. They were invoking the penalty clause. They were also requesting a formal review of our contract compliance procedures and threatening to escalate if it happened again. The office went into crisis mode. Meetings behind closed doors, executives huddled in conference rooms. My boss was in the center of it all, and I could hear his voice through the walls. He was loud, defensive. He kept insisting it wasn't his fault. He demanded to know where contract review had been. He asked where the oversight was. He wanted to know why someone hadn't caught the issue. I kept working, didn't say a word. Eventually, someone from upper management asked for the email chain. They wanted to trace how the schedule change had been handled, who'd approved it, whether there had been any internal warnings. Turns out, there had been. The IT department pulled the file access logs. They could see that I'd opened the draft email, that I printed something right before visiting his office that day, that I'd returned to my desk and logged the issue in my personal notes folder. They asked me about it in a private meeting. I didn't add anything extra. I just explained what I'd seen, what I'd said, and what he'd said to me. I told him he'd said he had it covered and told me not to interfere. So I didn't. The manager across from me blinked. She asked if I hadn't followed up or escalated the issue. I reminded her that he was my direct supervisor and that he'd told me to stay out of it. So I had stayed out of it. There wasn't much they could say to that. My boss tried to spin it. He argued that I should have pushed harder. He claimed I should have gone over his head. He insisted I clearly didn't understand how serious it was. But the emails didn't lie. The logs didn't lie. And his own words about not interfering and having it covered were right there in my notes, time-stamped and detailed. The penalty stood. The client stayed, but the relationship was damaged. My boss got a formal reprimand and lost his senior title. He stayed with the company, but his responsibilities got quietly reassigned. I didn't gloat, didn't rub it in. I just kept doing my job, reading the fine print and staying in my lane, exactly like he'd told me to. I started at the pharmacy back in high school, just picking up part-time hours here and there. When I left for college, I'd come back during breaks and grab shifts whenever I could. The summer after my sophomore year, my manager asked if I could work full-time while I was home. I needed the money for tuition, so I agreed without thinking twice. That's how I ended up being the only full-timer under 30 in a store full of women who had been working together for years. Most of them were moms or even grandmas who worked the morning and early afternoon shifts so they could be home when their kids got out of school. They all knew each other, had their routines, and I was just a college kid passing through. I didn't mind being the odd one out. I kept my head down, did my work, and stayed out of their drama. The main register was my station. I'd clock in at 8 in the morning and work straight through until noon when I was supposed to get my half-hour lunch break. That's when someone was supposed to relieve me so I could step away. But from day one, my relief never showed up on time. I'd page them over the intercom at noon, and nothing. I'd wait 15 minutes, then page again. Sometimes I'd be standing there until 1 or even 1:30 before anyone came to take over. It didn't bother me much. The register kept me busy, and I was getting paid either way. I figured maybe they forgot or got caught up with something else. I never complained about it because I didn't want to make waves. These women had been there for years, and I was just a summer help. By Wednesday of that first week, I noticed a pattern. The women who were supposed to relieve me would gather near the pharmacy counter around noon, talking and laughing. I could see them from my register. They'd chat for 10 or 15 minutes before one of them would eventually wander up to take over for me. On Thursday, I watched the same thing happen. They met up at the pharmacy counter at exactly noon. One of them even looked at her watch, saw it was time for my break, and kept talking. I paged twice that day before someone finally came up at 12:40. That first Friday, I finally got relieved a little after 1. I grabbed my lunch from my locker and headed to the break room. I barely sat down when the store manager walked in. She had this look on her face like I'd just kicked her dog or something. She told me she needed to talk to me, and I asked her what was up. Then she dropped it on me. She said she'd had multiple complaints about me screwing up everyone's break schedule. She told me she was really disappointed in me and that she thought I was more responsible than this. I put my sandwich down completely confused. I tried to explain that I didn't understand what she meant. I told her my relief hadn't been showing up on time and that I'd been stuck at the register past 1 almost every day that week. She actually put her hand up in my face like I was some kid making excuses. She cut me off and told me that starting next week, she wanted me back on main register at 12:30 sharp. No excuses, she said. She turned and walked out before I could say anything else. I sat there staring at my lunch, trying to figure out what just happened. Someone had been complaining about me. For what? Being late getting back from breaks I wasn't even taking on time. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If I was stuck at the main register past 1, that meant whoever was supposed to relieve me at noon was late starting their register shift, which meant the person who was supposed to relieve them couldn't go on break. And so on down the line, my late breaks were creating a domino effect, but I wasn't the one causing the delays. I was the one stuck waiting. None of it made sense, but I was too tired to care. I ate my lunch and went back to work. Over the weekend, I kept thinking about what she said. She wanted me back on the register at 12:30 sharp. No excuses. That meant my break started at noon, and if it was 30 minutes long, I needed to be back at 12:30. Simple math. If she wanted me back at 12:30 sharp, then I needed to leave at noon sharp. No excuses worked both ways. Monday morning rolled around and I decided I was going to follow her instructions to the letter. I showed up at 8 and started my shift like normal. Around 11:30 I caught one of the women who usually relieved me walking past the register. I asked her if she'd be ready to take over at noon. She gave me this weird look and said she'd be there when she was there. I didn't push it. At 11:45 I started paging my relief. No response. At 11:50 I paged again. Still nothing. At 11:55 I called for the second register operator to come up front. She came over looking confused because there was only one customer in line. She asked me why I needed her when there was nobody there. I told her I needed her to open the second register. She looked at me like I was crazy but shrugged and logged in. I closed out the main register, locked my cash drawer, carried it back to the office, and punched out at exactly noon. I walked to the break room and sat down with my lunch, watching the clock. 12:01, 12:02, I heard the intercom crackle to life. Someone was paging for the main register operator. Then again and again. At 12:10, the store manager came running into the break room. Her face was red and she looked like she was about to explode. She demanded to know why the main register was closed. She kept repeating the question, asking why the main register was closed when there was a line of customers out there. I reminded her that on Friday she told me I had to be off main register at noon sharp. No excuses. She shouted that wasn't what she said. I asked her if she told me that starting next week I had to be back on main register at 12:30 sharp. No excuses. She confirmed that, yes, that's what she said. Then I asked her if my break was a half hour long. She opened her mouth and closed it. She stood there for a few seconds, and I could see her doing the math in her head. Her face went from red to pale. She asked if I could please punch back in and take care of the line. She said she'd find my relief. I took one more bite of my sandwich, stood up, and walked back to the front. The line wasn't even that bad. I knocked it out in 10 minutes. Around 12:50, one of the other workers came speed walking up to relieve me. She looked nervous and wouldn't make eye contact. I went back to the break room to finish my lunch. About 5 minutes later, I heard raised voices coming from the office. The store manager was clearly having a conversation with someone, and she didn't sound happy. When I came back from break at 12:30, the woman who was supposed to relieve me at noon was working the second register. She looked miserable. The next day, my relief showed up at 11:55. She didn't say a word to me, just took over the register. And the day after that, and every single day for the rest of the summer, nobody ever apologized to me. Nobody ever acknowledged what had happened. But the complaints stopped. The late reliefs stopped. And I got my full 30-minute break every single day at noon. On my last day before heading back to school, the store manager pulled me aside. She told me they'd like to have me back next summer if I was interested. She said I was a reliable worker and they could use someone like me. I thanked her and told her I'd think about it. I never went back. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.